Hi everyone and welcome back to my vlog. For those new here, my name's Nicki, I'm an author and editor and I post videos here on YouTube about writing, editing, reading and all the things I love. Today we're here for my end of the month book wrap up and it's been quite a bumper month I think. There's probably about 26 or so titles to get through. So I will crack straight on. Just to say, for those who didn't watch my video yesterday with my film and TV wrap up, I'm filming in here today. It's a 41-degree day. It's not even 8:30 and we're already pushing towards 30 degrees centigrade for the Americans. So I couldn't face carting all my film equipment round to the library and setting it all up. It's just too darn hot. So just for today I thought I would film in here. I am thinking of possibly doing some of these end of the month ones as live streams in the future as well, just because I can't film them that much in advance, and if I'm busy it would be easier just to be able to film straight away without having to edit and mess around with them. So that's a potential for the future as we head into 2019 as well. But for today I am filming in advance, but I'm just doing it on the webcam. For ease, I want to get all my PC stuff done before I bake next to this window. So, as I said, we will crack straight on because there's quite a few of them to get through. First one I read, or not necessarily the first one I read, but the first one on the list anyway, is the Eyrbygga Saga, which is one of the Icelandic major sagas. This is essentially a family drama saga. There's conflict, there's back and forths of people owing each other blood debts and various things like that. It was great fun. It was a 5-star read for me. One of the real standout Icelandic sagas for certain. So if the Icelandic sagas are your thing, it's fun to check out. The next book I read was a NetGalley read, and it was The Life of Jean-André by D.A.B. Ronald. Anyone who knows me will know I'm quite interested in Jean-André. For those who don't know him, he was a British officer during the American Revolution, and he was hung as a spy. He was caught up in the Benedict Arnold treason. This was 5 stars for me. I've read quite a few biographies of André, and this one I thought was really standout, particularly because it included a lot of his early life. Like, a lot of the biographies I've read have tended to gloss over his early life in a chapter or two in order to get to the battle, if you like, get to the war. But this one really spent a lot of time looking at his early years and how that formed the sort of person he was, and how that might have led him to make the terrible mistakes he did that cost him his life in the end. So, yeah, 5-star read. Next up, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and that is by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. 5-star read for me. This is a book. It's considered a modern classic, and it's one of those ones that's sometimes on those lists of books to read before you die, which is what alerted me to it. I hadn't come across it otherwise, and decided to give it a go. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was a really thoughtful, deep book. It's about a man who's imprisoned, wrongly really. He's been imprisoned for treason, but actually in the middle of battle he just got lost, as did some of the rest of his troop. And when they found him again, he was captured as a POW for a little while, managed to escape, but they assumed that he was treasonous and sent him off to a Siberian prison. And so he's serving out this fairly long sentence, and this is just a one-day snapshot of his life in prison. So it's in the style of most Russian prison literature, which is a kind of whole genre on its own in some ways. But I found it really fascinating. I thought the characters were all really well drawn. You got a great sense of all these people that are in this cell with him, and of how monotonous really life is in the course of his day. Next up was another NetGalley read, and it was The Night Tiger by Yangsze Choo. This was a 5-star read for me as well. All starting off with a few 5-star reads for December. And it was a really gorgeous blend of literary fiction and magical realism. And there's this sort of idea that these people are being killed, and there's this tiger, and is this tiger someone who can take the form of a man? And it's all tied up in sort of Malaysian mythology, if you like, Malaysian folklore. It was really beautiful. If that's your kind of story, I definitely recommend it. It was really lyrical prose, beautifully written, and really captivating. Next up, I read Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and this was a birthday gift from my good friend Sarah. And it's a 4-star read for me. This is a vampire story set in Mexico City, and What I loved about it was the fact that it treats vampires as various subspecies. So there's the ones that we know about, the typical European style vampires, but there's also more sort of Aztec style vampires, and they all have their own traits and preferences and things that hurt them and things that don't, and so that made it quite interesting. There's a kind of gang turf war over drugs going on between some of the different vampire subspecies, and which this young boy gets caught up in when he meets a female vampire who's on the run. It was a really enjoyable story. It was quite different, and yeah, 4 stars. I thought it was worth a read if you like vampire stories and are looking for something with a bit of a twist. The next book I read was The Language Learner's Guidebook by Shane Dixon, and this was from NetGalley. This was 4.5 stars for me. It's basically looking at principles of language learning, what's the best way to go about learning a language so you'll retain it. I thought it had some really good concepts, some really good ideas. Interestingly, quite a lot of them are things I already do myself and that I just did off my own back, you know, in terms of listening to podcasts, films, music, reading books in the language. So it definitely had some really good ideas if you're someone who's keen to learn a language and is wondering about how you can approach it and how you can carry on learning once you've done that initial course of study. Next I read Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, and this was a 5-star read for me. I'd seen the trailer for the Amazon series that's coming on Prime, and I hadn't actually come across the book before then, but I thought the trailer looked fantastic, and I was told by everyone, you've got to read the book. So I did. I thought it was hilarious. It was a real laugh out loud fun. Kind of felt a bit like Douglas Adams style of humour here and there as well, hitchhiker kind of humour. Really loved it, and it makes me even more excited about seeing the TV series now. Next I watched, because we're talking about TV series, I mean read. Next I read The Complete Book of Calligraphy and Handlettering by Ferraro, Metcalf, Newhall and Stevens, and this was a NetGalley read again. And this was a 4.5 star read for me. It had a really nice layout, a really comprehensive collection of different lettering styles, each really well illustrated so you can follow along and give them a go. So if you're looking for a book on hand lettering, this is definitely one that's worth checking out. Next I read The Mammoth Book of Celtic Myths and Legends by Peter Beresford Ellis. This was a 5-star read for me. What I liked most about it was the scope of the collection, because so often when you read books on Celtic myth and legend, it kind of concentrates on Ireland and Scotland, whereas this one did include places like the Isle of Man, Cornwall, and also the French tradition as well. So that's definitely worth reading if you're into your Celtic myths. And next I read Saved by Grace by Sita, Bethel. This was a NetGalley read, and I gave it 4 stars. And this is an LGBT fiction and a paranormal fiction. Angels, demons. I thought it was great fun. There was wonderful diversity with the characters. And I thought all the characters came across as really well presented. So definitely worth reading if you like paranormal LGBT and you want something that's more than the standard romance. Next I read Mortal Engines by Philip Reeve, which was 4.5 stars for me. As I said in my video yesterday when I discussed the film, what I enjoyed about the book was the fact it was a little bit more morally grey with some of the characters than the film, which presented Valentine in particular as all-out bad guy, whereas in the book he's not really the main bad guy. He is one of them, but he is morally grey. He gets a kind of redemption towards the end as well. I love the idea of this story with the sort of post-apocalyptic cities on the move and they're all trying to eat each other up to get the resources. I thought that's a brilliant idea. I love the steampunk elements. And definitely I think the book was a little bit deeper and a little bit more interesting than the film, which kind of cut out all that grey middle part. Next up, another NetGalley read, Prince of Air and Darkness by M.A. Grant. This is another LGBT paranormal piece. Or paranormal / fantasy, I guess, because it's more about fae. And it was a really great premise. I liked the idea that this guy who's a human has got this unexpected power with ley lines, and he is sent to a school full of magical creatures, mostly fae, but others as well. And he doesn't really fit in. And he's got a sort of bizarre enemy / romance relationship with one of his roommates, who's a fae prince. I don't want to say too much more and give it away, but I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was really well written, lovely idea, and it just came together really beautifully. Next, I read World Light by Halldór Laxness, the Icelandic author who, if you watch my videos, you'll know I absolutely love him. This was another 5-star read. The character of Olafur is absolutely awesome. He's a would-be poet who's essentially a parish pauper. And as he goes through life, he meets a strange medium, a shady entrepreneur, and a host of different women who all fall for his charm and his lovely hair and eyes. It's a great story. As with all Laxness's work, it has a wonderful sense of place, really diverse group of characters, and a humour that is kind of wry. It's funny because it's almost a farce in some ways, some of his stories, but they all have this great emotional depth as well, which kind of keeps them real, and it makes the humour sort of more wry and almost black at times than farcical. Next up, I read another NetGalley book, which was Twilight Vows by Maggie Shane and Shion Hanyu. Apologies if I'm saying the Japanese name wrong. And this was a graphic novel, Harlequin graphic novel. It's a vampire story. I gave it 4 stars. I thought the basic story was basic, for want of a better word. It was basic. It was pretty obvious. It didn't go anywhere particularly exciting. You kind of could guess what was going to happen right from the start. But the illustrations were really beautiful, and it was worth reading just for that. And I do need a quick little glass of water, because when I usually film these on my video in the library, I usually have a little break halfway through and I can get a drink, but I can't do that when I'm filming like this. There we go. Now I'm ready to commence the second batch. And the next one I read was Lady of the Camellias by Alexandre Dumas. Fils, I have to say, the son. This was 4 stars for me. It's kind of a love story with a bit of a mystery element in it. But I did find it fairly pedestrian in some ways. It was interesting, but it wasn't exciting. Hence the 4 stars. Next I read Bones of the Moon by Jonathan Carroll. This was a 5-star read for me. This was one a friend sent me for my birthday. I'd never heard of it before, but it was a really imaginative and compelling story. It's kind of, I'd call it fantasy, although you could argue maybe it's a bit more magical realism, but it's about this woman who has these dreams of a strange land, and over time the dreams become more and more vivid, and that world starts to bleed, I guess, into her real world. Again, it's one of those you can't really say too much about without giving it away, but it was a really brilliant concept. I absolutely loved the idea, and it worked so well, and I was absolutely captivated from start to finish. Next up, Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern. Now, if any of you have watched my videos, you will also probably know that I have attempted this book twice in the past. Usually have no trouble reading classics, and I love 18th century literature, but I've always struggled with Tristram Shandy. And I was determined to get through it, and I've always tried to read it as an ebook before, which I think was a mistake, because it was a free ebook, Project Gutenberg. The formatting wasn't brilliant. It ended up like 1,000 pages, so it kind of felt like a slog as well. So I had a bit of a voucher for my local bookstore, and I was able to go in and pick up a copy with only a couple of dollars out of pocket. So I decided to try it in print, and it was easier, but I still didn't enjoy it. I think the problem is I don't like all the digressions. I can see it's a really clever piece, I can see it's witty, it's a bit bawdy at times, and I can appreciate Stern's skill in the construction of the story, but I just don't find the story and the characters compelling. Particularly, there's so many digressions. We never really get the main story that we're promised, the life and opinions of Tristram Shandy. It's all like digressions off into stories about his uncle and father and various things. So it's just not one I don't think that really works for me. But I'm glad I finally got through from the beginning to the end, and I can say I've read it. The next one I read was The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This story I gave Tristram Shandy 3 stars. Girl on the Train I gave 4 stars. It was an okay story. It kept my interest. I didn't really guess who did it until quite close to the end. There were comma splices everywhere though, which drove me absolutely insane. And I was like, it's this book released from a big major publisher. You think they could have got rid of the comma splices, but who knows, they were just everywhere. But other than that, it was enjoyable enough. So next was The Big Book of Crochet Stitches by Linehalser and Weiss. 5 stars. This is a really lovely connection. It's a nice mix of different stitches. They're all split into types of stitches, and each has really clear explanation of how to form the stitch and a nice big photograph so you can see what you're aiming for. So for a crocheter, it's a really good resource. Next I read Non-Binary Memoirs of Gender and Identity by Mika Rujanov and Scott Duane. This was a 5-star read for me. This is a collection of stories, recollections from non-binary people discussing their experience and illustrating in a way what non-binary is and how it can actually be a lot of different things to different people. So if you're interested in gender, LGBT studies, anything like that, or if you just want to get a better sense of what non-binary means, this was a really awesome book. It was fascinating and informative, and absolutely hats off to these people who were happy to share their experiences, because I found it really informative and really helpful. Next I read Are We French Yet? By, I should say Non-Binary was from Netflix. Next I read Are We French Yet? By Keith Von Sickle. This is a book I received from the author as a review copy. I read Keith's previous book, which was about his trips to Provence with his wife, and they kind of live there. They live in the US for 9 months of the year and work, and then they go to Provence for 3 months of the year. A wonderful lifestyle. I wish I could do it. 4 stars for me. As with the first book, it was really fun, entertaining, lots of great little anecdotes from things that have happened to him and his wife during their time in Provence. Next, back to NetGalley for 2000 Years by M. Dalth. This was a 3-star read for me. It's a fantasy, but I didn't find it very captivating. I didn't think there was a lot of depth. I never cared about the characters. It's one of those fantasies where you have someone from the modern, like our world, who's taken to a fantasy realm, and it turns out that she's meant to be their prophesied empress. There's obviously a bit of a love story. The villain was just a real cardboard cutout villain to my mind. He didn't really have any depth, which was a shame. He just was all the time kind of thing, doing some pretty nasty things, and yeah, I never really understood why. So that was a problem for me, which is why I only got 3 stars. Next, Around the Corner Crochet Borders by E.D. Ekman. This is a 4.5-star read for me. As with the Big Book of Crochet Stitches I already mentioned, this was a nice selection of different options for how you can border your blankets or whatever else you're making. It was nicely presented, it's easy to read, easy to find what you want. So yeah, just a nicely presented book for crocheters. Next I read Vows of Heaven by Kathy Griffith, and this was one I received from the author as a birthday gift, and I gave it 3.5 stars. It's essentially a modern retelling of Hamlet, and as such I liked the story idea. I actually wrote my own retelling of Hamlet along similar lines. Mine's never been published, it's just sitting on my hard drive, but I had a similar concept to Kathy, and I liked the idea. I thought that worked well. However, she tried to keep the language to match a lot of Shakespeare's speeches and things as well, and that didn't quite work for me, which is why I could only give it 3.5. And I think the reason for that was it felt a little bit stilted. It didn't feel like natural dialogue because she was just trying to modernise the Shakespeare lines. I think it would have worked better if she'd just gone with modern dialogue and not really worried quite so much about matching Shakespeare's speeches. But it was still really interesting. It's romance, so if that's your thing, if you like Shakespeare retellings, you like MM romance, it's definitely worth checking out anyway. And finally, we've reached the end. Dreamkeeper by Amber R. Jewell, and this was another NetGalley one, and I gave this 4.5 stars. This is using the Sandman legend, and it's the idea that he's protecting the dream world, and he's put some important information into our heroine's head, and he visits her in her dreams, keeping her safe to try to stop the nightmares from getting out into the real world. It was entertaining. It's a YA. There's a bit of romance, there's plenty of action, and I just really loved it. It was a really fresh, new idea that I hadn't come across before. So if you like YA fantasy, it's definitely worth checking out because it is something a little bit different. So those were my books. I actually will have one more that I finished before the end of the month, which was Wakenhurst by Michelle Paver, which is a NetGalley read too. However, because I need to get this film today, I'm probably going to finish it tomorrow night, so I will talk to you about that one in January's video. So, I will end there. It's been a bit of a bumper reading month. I believe I am ending the year on about 229 books for the year. So, my goal was 150, so I've absolutely smashed it, which is awesome. And I don't know if I'll do quite so well next year, but I'll probably aim for my 150 again. That's pretty much my standard amount. I am obviously doing my reading challenges again. I'll mention them. I'm doing a sort of world reading challenge, which is going to be an ongoing one. I'm not going to finish it next year, but I want eventually to read a book written by someone who was born in every country in the world. It's a bit of an ask, I know, but I'm hoping to cross a few more of them off the list during 2019. But I am also doing the NJM book challenge, which I have created. I'm going to put a link to all the blog information on that below, because anyone's welcome to join in. There's a hashtag. I'll try to keep an eye on that on Twitter and around the place to see how you're all getting on. There are only 25 categories, so it's a nice, easy one, and if you need to, you can even use the same book if it covers a couple of categories, that's fine. So it's a nice, easy, relaxed challenge if you want something that's not too full on. But I will put a link to my blog post about it below for you in the spiel. I will end there. I hope you've all had a good 2018. If you haven't, I hope 2019's better, and I certainly wish you all a great new year as we head into 2019. And I've got some more content obviously coming for you on the vlog during 2019. I've got around 4 or 5 videos a month planned, so I will look forward to seeing you all again very soon with some of those. Bye for now, everyone.